Well, high school was interesting in two ways because it was in the city center of Lyon, so a very posh school, a private school, not private in the British way, but like privately funded.
The American way, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And so me being an immigrant from mostly kind of a working class background, so you've got this socio-economic factor, and then I guess from my generation, from my level, I was maybe the only black guy in the school. So you had two things. So it was almost a question of survival.
You mean in your year?
In my year,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
So it was almost a question of survival. I had to be arrogant, otherwise, I would,
You'd get pushed
lose my
over,
identity. I would get, pushed, and Africa was never on the topic. For dissertations or that type of thing, you had only one way of thinking, which was very linear, which was very monolithic. So I kind of posed myself in, why not championing everything, because I'm a social champion in that school. I'm a cultural champion in that school, so I might as well, use all that and trying to bring something different, which is the only thing I can bring if I don't want to lose myself. Yeah. Otherwise, I had to adapt, and then which means forgetting who I am. Really.
What do you think supported your distinction between the others? I mean, besides just your skin color, because obviously you would have been in this immigrant working class household.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about that experience that also maybe gave you a different perspective, or allowed you to see things differently, or maybe be able to challenge that, as you said, that kind of linear thinking that was going on?
Well, I guess an exposure to a different world, and growing up, and having your parents starting to speak like a different language. Right. They would speak Lingala, they would speak Kikongo. You had guests. My family is very religious, so you have guests from the church, quite high rank. So I remember having discussions about the Big Bang Theory, and where it sits against the Bible, with the bishop, and I was like 10 years old, so that type of thing, and but really open people, and that was super cool. So just that was really cool, actually, yeah. And just being exposed to something different, so which means you've got something different to say, and this is just about you.
It's amazing. It's funny because I was just in Bristol last week with someone who we've also had on the podcast, Jess, the other Jess Thompson, from My Grateful, and her dad is a professor of primary care and medicine, and her mother is kind of like the person in integral medicine in the entire country, and her the family's just very kind of well educated and like very well read, and every meal is some kind of in-depth discussion about the Big Bang Theory, about universal credit, about the state of the NHS and health, or anything you could think of.
Which is interesting. It's a training for life, actually.
It's fascinating, man, and it's totally the opposite of anything I've ever experienced.
Very big ideas,
as a family.
Ideas driven.
Yeah, it's just big. Let's just talk about big ideas and eat our roast. It's like it's extraordinary.
Make your identity.
Yeah. But so you felt like then that it sounds like, and I love this because I think the conversation around diversity becomes so linear and becomes so much about, are you a man or a woman, are you white or black, when actually the conversation about diversity, and this is so important for teams, for creativity and your ability to challenge and be different and try new things, it's not just about that. It's about language. It's about cognition. What are you exposed to? It's about what kinds of conversations are you having. Yeah. It's about exposure to also different types of cultures. It wasn't just that you were in a Congolese context. You were also in a Christian context, and you were also mixed that with the fact that you were living in France. And I think the conversation around diversity is really limited at the moment. And
I think it's like we're talking about diversity as political, when it should be.
It's not a game of opposition.
Yeah, it should be about the person more than anything. Of course, we've got like influences, but like I think it's just talking about the that on the political level is just too surface.
It's just limiting. It's just really limiting. Yeah.
Look at your experience. Like, how many other black people black dudes do you know that have gone through a very similar experience? Not a lot, obviously, because you just told me that.
Well, I imagine there are a lot actually, but the problem is we don't talk. We don't have a platform. You know, it's not only black people. It can be, you know, Italian descent. It can be Portuguese.
What I mean.
It's just we don't talk. We don't have a platform to actually share that experience, and because they're viewed just on an opposition point of view.
I mean, for me, like, I don't. Yeah, there are people with similar experiences to mine, but like I don't. Yeah, I mean, I guess you. Well, as you grow up as well, you get a little bit more. How'd you say? What's the word? Idiosyncratic, right? So then it just becomes.
What do you mean by that?
You're a mix of very different things, and those things create you as an individual.
Okay,
and then yes, of course you are influenced by the culture or by the space that you're in, the surrounding, your school, like how were you educated? Who did you went to have talks with? You know, like you went to have talks with the bishop about the Big Bang, like you know, like all these little things they join together to create you, like as a
mature person.
So
make peace.
That's what I mean about the talking about the political side.
Yeah.
Like just talking about this on a political level is just not deep enough.
I guess,
in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's also really interesting because then from what I'm hearing as well is that diversity only individual idiosyncrasies, as you're saying, only really are useful if you are able just to be yourself, right? If you're able to draw on all these pieces, and you know, even if you're a white male and you, like myself, you can draw on the fact that you're from an immigrant South Mediterranean family, that you've grown up in Silicon Valley, which is also incredibly diverse and quite a unique place, and you've traveled and you've done these things. The only way that they actually manifest or actually are useful is if you just live them and you're not ashamed of them, or you just acknowledge them, or which is maybe the challenge around diversity, is a lot of people just don't end up living themselves. They don't end up kind of being okay with all those pieces, all those kind of idiosyncratic pieces, which brings, I think, back to something that you said earlier, which was about freedom. And you said, you know, at some point there was it just kind of provoked, or it just reminded you, or you realized that actually I can just be free, and I can just be a designer. And how about that? Well, what? Because I imagine also a lot of people listening, and generally I think this is a big topic in the podcast, which is like, what does that transformation or what does that evolution look like, where you just at some point become free to just say, I am Jess, I'm French Congolese, I'm this, and I'm also a designer. How do you feel that?
The designer philosopher.
Well, that's too ambitious. I can't say that yet. But I think it's still it's an ongoing process. You know, you've got this very, very, very empowering process about, you know, you being confident and starting to put your work out there, getting validation from people, getting critique from people as well, and you know, being strong enough to take both. But also being able to doubt yourself, and you know, and almost criticizing yourself, but from human perspective, you know, so positive critique, and being able to, you know, kind of reinvent, and you know, it's I guess, you know, a virtuous circle, and I guess that's what's giving me this confidence. But I think I was evolving. I evolved faster when I started talking to other designers or other practitioners to put a broader perspective, and being able to you know, to be vulnerable and have that conversation sometimes, and said, what do you think about that, you know, and you know, not being too shaky, pretending not to be, still now, and so you know, that's I do.
Do you feel like that was just about getting stuff out in front of people?
Sometimes it's just about time, and you know, you can always perfect things. It's very good to be a perfectionist, but just go out there and face the world, because otherwise it's, you know, there's no point of doing what you do.